The year is 1985. Nintendo's having a great time. The Famicom has become an established, successful video game console in Japan, and the NES is replicating that success in the United States. Super Mario Bros. Has become a national phenomenon in both countries, becoming the best-selling video game worldwide. Dude, we gotta make a sequel. Plans were immediately in place to make sure the public got Mario 2, and Nintendo made sure to shoot their shot. Alright guys, we did it. We managed to evolve the original game and revolutionize the series with Super Mario Bros. 2! This is just Super Mario Bros. But harder. Nintendo of America knew that this game was gonna flop in the States. The game was a much harder take on the original, and video games were still recovering from the 1983 video game crash. If this game released and led Mario down the path of typical frustrating 80s platformers, it could ruin the series' reputation. After all, people liked the original so much because of how simple it was. Nintendo knew they had a golden goose and they couldn't mess this up. Enter the Middle East. Nintendo had been working on a new game involving Super Mario Bros. Designer Shigeru Miyamoto and newcomer Kensuke Tanabe. Their first prototype was a two-player cooperative game focused on vertical platforming and players working together to reach the top. After a few changes, including the addition of horizontal platforming at Miyamoto's request, the game was unfortunately scrapped due to console limitations and conflicts about the game's direction. This new game stayed in purgatory until Tanabe was instructed to make a game using characters from Yume Kojo, a Japanese technology expo meaning dream machine in Japanese. This was a crazy event featuring technology like high-definition television and 3D movies that was not commonplace during the mid-1980s. This expo had a mask motif and had characters and themes based on the medieval story Arabian Nights, both of which would play heavily into the final product of Tanabe's game. After resuming development, reworking the gameplay, and tidying things up, July 10th, 1987 saw the Japanese release of Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic. The game featured an Arabian theme as well as 4 playable characters. Imogen was the main character with balanced stats, Mama had a high jump, Papa was strong, and Lena could float in midair. The game was single player and you could play as whoever you wanted, but in order to complete the game, you had to beat the game with all 4 characters. Doki Doki Panic was a success in Japan. And that brings us back to the Mario series. Super Mario Bros. 2 was not the answer for the American audiences. But what was? Well, what if there was a platformer created with Miyamoto's help and was both easy enough for Americans and already successful in Japan? Well, Nintendo followed this train of thought, and this became this. It was a strange choice, but for what it's worth, this is not the first time Nintendo reskinned a game. Donkey Kong was originally a Popeye game. The United States version of Super Mario Bros. 2 was conceptually the same game as Doki Doki Panic, but had many cosmetic changes. These characters turned into this. This turned into this. This turned into this. Lots of changes were made to the way the game looks to make sure it didn't look like a complete albatross within the Mario series. Good job with that one, guys. Despite the facelift, Doki Doki Panic and the game America knows as Mario 2 are still very similar. The enemies notably all remain the same, giving us some of Mario's classic characters like Shy Guy, Birdo, Pokey, and bob-omb. Mamu, the bad guy in Doki Doki Panic, became Wart. Subcon was originally based off of Yume Kojo, but got retconned to become a part of the Mario 2 plot. The history of the game Americans know as Super Mario Bros. 2 is a complicated and fascinating tale of regional differences, difficult decisions, and technology expos. But on October 9th, 1988, Super Mario Bros. 2 finally landed in North America, and Mario fans finally got the sequel they were hoping for. Was the USA's version of Super Mario Bros. 2 a better sequel, or should Nintendo have stuck with Japan's follow-up? Well, it's kind of a Mario game. As soon as you launch into Super Mario Bros. 2, it is apparent that this is a totally different game than Super Mario Bros. The first Super Mario Bros. Was a linear, simple, but thoughtful horizontal 2D platformer. and this is immediately different. One of the first things you notice about Super Mario Bros. 2 is the character select screen. If you remember, Doki Doki Panic featured 4 playable characters, and Mario 2 is the same. The 4 playable characters have been transformed into Mario characters though. Mario and Luigi are both available, just like in the original, but for the first time, both Toad and Princess Toadstool are playable. Unlike Super Mario Bros., these characters are not simple palette swaps, and each have their own strengths and weaknesses. One major change from Doki Doki Panic is the character requirements, or lack thereof. In Doki Doki Panic, you are required to beat the game entirely with each character in order to 100% complete the game, but in Super Mario Bros. 2, that requirement is luckily waived. Instead, all you need to do in Mario 2 is beat the game once. That's it. You can play all the way through with one character, switch characters every level, develop a pattern, try to optimize the characters you choose for each level, or do whatever else suits your fancy. This is a change that I'm a fan of, as it removes what would have been a ton of padding. I could go more in depth about the differences between each character, but frankly, I'd rather wait until we've discussed more about the game itself in order to better contextualize what each character is good at in relation to each other. Instead, this is a good time to talk about some of the general level design changes featured in Super Mario Bros. 2. Super Mario Bros. Was a game that rarely changed in gameplay style. Each level was a horizontal side-scrolling platforming challenge with some enemies sprinkled in, and a time limit forcing the player to get a move on. In that way, Mario 1 felt like a 32-level platforming for dummies game, introducing new video gamers to the genre and creating a challenge for video game veterans. On the other hand, Super Mario Bros. 2 feels a lot more like an adventure. The scenery changes throughout Mario 2, and a lot more game mechanics are thrown in. Besides horizontal scrolling sections, there are also many vertical sections in this game. Due to this, Super Mario Bros. 2 is the closest the Mario series has ever gotten to being a Kirby-style platformer. The vertical sections also include screen wrapping, a feature it shares with Mario Bros. Of all games. The combat system has been completely changed from Super Mario Bros. As well, and this feels like the most significant change in the sequel. In the original, you had very few ways to dispatch of enemies. Some enemies could be stomped on, and most enemies could be killed using a fire flower. You could also use Koopa shells to kill nearly everything, and hitting a brick block with an enemy on the other side dealt with most enemies as well. And of course, the Starman cleans shop. Super Mario Bros. 2 actually shrinks the amount of ways you can defeat enemies, but does it in a good way. The Starman and Koopa shells return, but jumping on enemies no longer kills them. Instead, your character will jump on the enemy and just kind of hang out. Once you're on top of this enemy, you can pick them up and throw them at another enemy. You can do this with inanimate objects as well, don't worry. The ideas for this concept give the combat system its variety. Of course, you can throw a shy guy at another shy guy, but there are other options too. You can use Koopa shells, bombs, mushroom blocks, eggs, keys, and more vegetables than you could shake a stick at. POW blocks return for Mario Bros. And kill most ground-based enemies, and the stopwatch will slow down enemies for a short time. The power-up system has been slashed a bit, mostly due to the changes in the combat system. Mushrooms have been functionally replaced by the health system. In each level, all 4 characters will start with 2 hearts. When they take a hit, they will go down to 1 heart and shrink. After defeating 8 enemies, a heart will appear from the bottom of the screen, and this is the main intended way for you to recover health in Mario 2. The fire flower is gone, but the Starman does return. You no longer get the Starman by breaking blocks, but rather by collecting 5 cherries and collecting it from the bottom of the screen, much like the heart. The live system has also been revamped, and it is an improvement on the original, but still isn't quite satisfactory yet. 1-up mushrooms have become even less common than in Super Mario Bros. There are also no brick blocks, question mark blocks, or coins hanging out in the air, meaning you can't collect 100 coins to receive lives either. So, if there are hardly any 1-up mushrooms, and you can't gain lives by collecting 100 coins, then how do you collect lives? Oh god, go back. This is a good time to explain another item, the magic potion. When you drop this item, it spawns a door to subspace. You will want to place these near pluckable grass patches, as in subspace, plucking these patches nets you coins, which gives you attempts at the lottery at the end of the level. There are also hidden spots in the level where mushrooms reside in subspace. Collecting these mushrooms gives you an extra hit point and refills your health to maximum. Your time in subspace is limited, meaning efficient plucking of coins and mushrooms is necessary, and I like this mechanic a lot. Finding spots in the level that take advantage of subspace is a lot of fun and makes up a lot of the replay value this game has. Unfortunately, the lottery at the end of the level is a crock of shit. Mario games like using slots as a minigame to obtain lives, but in Mario 2, it is the primary way of obtaining extra lives, and it is difficult to actually win the lottery. Scratch that, it is rare to win the lottery. Saying it is difficult implies you can time the slots, and as far as I know, is completely luck-based. Gathering coins in the subspace levels is a ton of fun, but often I feel I get disproportionate rewards from these coins, and I can't control what I get, so it's a little disappointing. With most of the major gameplay changes discussed, this is a good time to take a look at an abridged run-through of Super Mario Bros. 2. The story in Super Mario Bros. 2 is light. Mario sees a new world in his dreams and gets his brother, Crush, and Mushroom to come with him to a cave. There, they stumble into a world called Subcon and are tasked with defeating Wart and freeing the land. Due to the fact that this isn't originally a Mario game, there's no easy way to relate this game to Mario canon, so they went with the "it was all a dream" ending, which is a bit lame, and going over this story in any more detail is probably a waste of time at this point. World 1-1 immediately throws you for a loop by starting with a vertical section, and throughout this level, you get an immediate taste of what this game is about. You have vertical descending sections, vertical climbing sections, underground areas, horizontal platforming areas, and a boss fight at the end with Birdo. You will end up seeing a lot of Birdo fights in this game, and while their pattern changes throughout the game, for the most part you will beat Birdo by hitting them with 3 thrown items, with those projectiles usually being the eggs that Birdo shoots at you. Birdo's a fine boss and certainly more of a challenge than the Bowser fights in Mario 1. Considering Birdo is the boss of normal levels, they can be considered a mini-boss of sorts. And when using that framing, yeah, Birdo's fine, I have no problem with the fights. After defeating Birdo, you go through the suspicious-looking door into the next level. 1-1 also introduces many of the standard enemies you'll encounter throughout the game. Shy Guys are Mario 2's equivalent to Goombas, being easy to dispatch and having very simple patterns. Tweeters are similar to Shy Guys but will hop around as well. Ninjas hop higher than Tweeters and can chase the player as well. Finally, Hoopsters climb the vine and can damage you. World 1-2 is similar to 1-1 but adds some new elements. Upon grabbing this key, one of the masks in the room starts following you, and the mask will hound you as long as you're holding the key. This gameplay element will be featured in many levels, but the door is close to the pot where the key is found, making this a low-stress introduction to the mechanic. Bombs and bombable blocks first appear here and make up one of my favorite Mario 2 mechanics that's based on the plucking and throwing. More enemies are introduced here. Besides the mask called a Phanto, we have Pidgeots, probably the most iconic but forgotten Mario 2 enemies. They'll swoop down at you using their flying carpet. My first obstacle of 1-2, a long bottomless pit, is cleared easiest by killing a Pidgeot and using its magic carpet to cross the gap. This is a great mechanic to see this early on in the Mario series. Bezos are another flying enemy that will fly horizontally from one side of the screen, serving as Mario 2's equivalent to bullet bills in that way. Finally, Sniffits act as Shy Guys with little projectiles, and they're pretty tricky. 1-3 features a fun platforming section at the beginning, and then a vertical warehouse section. You're supposed to go to the top, grab a key, then descend the warehouse with the key in hand, all the way to the locked door at the bottom. I gotta admit, this section is a ton of fun, and immediately vindicates the usage of the key mechanic. My biggest problem though, is the spikes at the bottom of the pit. It feels a little too trial and error-y, especially for those who went straight to the top when entering the room and didn't know about the spikes at all. A couple more enemies make their debuts here. Trouters will jump out of the water, acting as platforms for non-princess players to use to cross the gap. Sparks will rotate around platforms, making the players' jumps more difficult to time. Oddly enough, Sparks are the only enemy in Mario 2 that had appeared in a previous Mario game. The game in question? Yeah, this one. This level ends with a battle against Mouser, our first real boss, and oh boy, this one's a lot of fun. Mouser throws bombs at you and you have to catch them and throw them at his platform. This is the best boss battle as of this point in the Mario series, although at this point there wasn't a whole ton of competition. Each world takes a similar approach to World 1 as far as its layout goes. The first level generally introduces new mechanics, the second level builds upon those mechanics, and the third level tests your mastery of the mechanics with a boss fight at the end. World 2 is a desert world, and this makes Super Mario Bros. 2 the first game in the Mario series to somewhat theme its worlds. And this is a video game trend that I really like, pretty much no matter what, as the lack of world theming makes Mario 1's levels feel way more forgettable to me. World 2 introduces 3 new enemies. Cobrats like to pop in and out of jars and shoot projectiles at the player. They often appear in quicksand too, and I absolutely hate dealing with them. Panzers are completely nuts. Some of these stay stationary and shoot, while the terrifying ones actually chase you and are a major pain in the ass to deal with. Finally, Pokies are actually pretty inconsequential. They meander around and their height is their biggest threat. They're a cool enemy, and I understand why they continue to be used in Mario games even nowadays, but they aren't as formidable as some of the other enemies being introduced at this point in the game. 2-1 introduces quicksand that will suck the player up and kill them, jars that you can go into, and it introduces these sand digging sections. These are here to test the player's recognition of enemy patterns and forces the player to multitask on both making their way to the bottom and also not getting hit. This would be okay if these sections were fun, simple, and short. However, these sand sections feel tedious no matter who you play as, and this is one of the least fun mechanics this game uses. The Birdo fight takes place underground, and upon clearing this level, you start World 2-2 underground. You quickly go back above ground and start the level proper, but this continuity is a fun moment and emphasizes the fact that this is an adventure. Level 2-2 itself doesn't actually introduce much besides Red Birdo, who shoots fireballs in addition to eggs. You can't pick up these fireballs and they will hurt you. They're fireballs. 2-3 is segmented into a couple of different areas. The first area is a pretty standard overworld desert area, but once you go inside the ruins, things change up a bit. This part combines the slog of sand digging with the horrors of key escorting to create a room I am not fond of. The third section uses sand as platforming obstacles, but seems far too easy to navigate considering you can just walk through the sand. The boss of 2-3 is Triclide, a Hydra type boss that spits fireballs at you. The game is nice enough to provide the player mushroom blocks to use offensively or defensively. I like this boss a lot as it allows for multiple playstyles and characters to succeed. World 3 has a waterfall motif, and 3-1's first section features a vertical climb up a waterfall. There's another section that requires you to steal a flying carpet, but this level's pretty forgettable. 3-2 is a lot more memorable as it starts you on a grassy plain going from left to right, but once you go underground, you start going from right to left. World 3-3 is easily the toughest level yet as of this point in the game. It features a labyrinthian warehouse section with a mask chase down a long vertical descent, which is both thrilling and frustrating. The boss battles are rematched with Mouser, but this one's a bit tougher. The platform Mouser stands on is higher, it takes 5 hits to kill him, and there's a spark rotating around the room to add yet another thing to worry about. World 3 introduces more new enemies, including the iconic bob-omb, which blows up when it gets near you. In their introduction level, they are dropped by flying albatrosses, which are enemies that you can ride later on in the game. Porcupos are probably the game's least memorable enemy, they just kind of hang out, and Ostros are typically seen being ridden by Shy Guys, once again a pretty forgettable enemy, but at least these guys are invulnerable to the POW block, which makes them a little bit more interesting. World 4 is an ice world, which marks the debut of the dreaded Mario ice physics into the series. To be completely honest, I usually don't have a problem with ice physics in Mario games, which seems to put me in the minority. It's handled well in this game too, with the enemies called flurries bounding about the ice and using their momentum to harm the player. Unfortunately, 4-1 is very brief. This is the only level in the whole game with no boss at all. There's Shy Guys riding the bob-omb vehicle, but this doesn't suffice for me. 4-2 features these whales, which are not enemies, but their water spouts will hurt the player if they hit the water from the side. You can ride these spouts from the top though and use them as platforms. This is a cool game mechanic that we don't see any more from in the Mario series, ever. 4-3 starts with seemingly nowhere to go. A conspicuously placed Birdo allows you to cross a very large gap on the right with their eggs, and this is a satisfying puzzle. I appreciate stuff like this a lot more than, for example, the looping sections in Mario 1's castles. Once over there, you have to go through a castle and come through to the other side. This is a cool cool structure for the level, but the problem is that the entrance and exit are both placed pretty close to each other. Both Luigi and the princess can clear this gap with just a simple jump, and that makes me feel like this level wasn't tested properly. The castle itself is a ton of fun, featuring vertical sections with flurries and a Phanto chase, and I recommend this section even if playing as Luigi and Princess, as it's a lot more fun to just play the level than to cheese it. The boss of World 4 is Fry Guy, and this, I'm not gonna lie, is definitely the best boss in the game. It's maybe the toughest boss in Mario 2 relative to where it is in the game. There's no way to cheese the Fry Guy, and you just have to use pattern recognition and quick dodging to win the fight. After getting 3 hits on Fry Guy with the mushroom blocks, he will split into 4 smaller Fry Guys, and each of these take 1 hit. Killing multiple of these small Fry Guys with 1 mushroom block is a lot of fun. World 5-1 is a relatively benign stage, at least from a combat perspective. The waterfall platforming section in this cave is a fun challenge with any character except for the princess, who just kind of breaks this level. 5-1 is mostly notable for introducing Green Birdo, who will not shoot any eggs at all, just fireballs. These fights have other projectiles available, but it introduces projectile management into the equation, a skill usually only needed against bosses at the end of the world like Triclyde and Fry Guy. 5-2's first section features a lot of platforming featuring the hoopsters and is a lot of fun. The next section is climbing vines while avoiding Sniffets and hoopsters, which is not so much fun. Then the next segment is a free-falling segment where you have to avoid spikes on each screen and avoid falling into a pit at the bottom. Trial and error is, say it with me folks, not a lot of fun at all. 5-3 starts with a section featuring loads of bob-ombs, as well as regular bombs, as well as albatrosses dropping bob-ombs. This is the kind of action you can't get in any other Mario game. The second section has more bob-ombs, but isn't quite as fun. However, you enter a tree after this, and a level that takes place inside a tree is immediately cool. The tree room features a race against sparks, enemy spawner management, combat against the aggro pantsers, and yes, since you asked, there are bob-ombs here too. The last section before the boss fight features another segment where Pidgeot's flying carpet is necessary, and while I usually don't mind the reuse of game mechanics, there isn't much here that sets us apart from the other flying carpet sections in the game. For whatever reason, you also have to defeat a red Birdo here, and I'm not really sure why. After defeating Birdo, you get an opportunity to fight the real boss, Claw Grip. And this battle is worthless. The intended way of fighting Claw Grip is to jump on the rolling rocks he throws and throw them back at him. This is finicky and I could never figure out a safe way to do this, so I figured out you could cheese the fight by just standing here and waiting for rocks to roll past the gap to you. This technique turns this boss battle from a frustrating one to a boring one. Either way, this is Mario 2's weakest boss. Earlier on, I said that the worlds were themed somewhat. The reason why I use the word somewhat is because there are reused themes in the second half of the game. World 5 also has a waterfall motif just like World 3, and once we go into World 6, we'll find out that this is another desert world, and World 6 happens to be my least favorite world in the game. It reuses a lot of game mechanics from World 2 and just doesn't stand out to me. 6-1's first section is a long section filled with quicksand and cobrats, and I've been showing you footage of 2-1 this whole time. 6-1 also features this needle in a haystack puzzle, and while I remember where I need to go now whenever I play this level, I only remember because of how painstaking my first time through this level was. Don't worry though, because this section features sand digging too, my favorite. 6-2 starts with an albatross riding section. There's a magic potion and mushroom on 2 islands halfway there, but in order to grab this mushroom, you have to hop on an albatross, ride to the right, grab the mushroom, hop on another albatross, and go back to the beginning before getting another albatross heading to the right. This is dumb level design. This level is also quite barren, featuring only this albatross section before the Birdo fight. 6-3 is a journal full of trials and tribulations, including quicksand, bomb throwing, enemy spawners, sand digging, bombable blocks, and an arduous vine climbing section, and I rarely experience any of it because you can just do this from the beginning. We get a Birdo fight before rematching Triclyde, and while recycling boss fights sometimes really grinds my gears, playing Donald Trump Simulator is fun enough that I can give this a pass. World 7 is the only world in this game with just 2 levels, and the first one starts with a section filled with stuff that ultimately doesn't matter because the way to progress is another albatross riding section. The most memorable section is the area with the Shy Guy spawners. That part can be quite tough. As lame as 7-1 is though, 7-2 is a fun level. This level is one of the longest in Mario 2 and features multiple boss fights. After a Birdo fight, Mario goes through the door My favorite thing to do with this guy is kill it absurdly high in the air for maximum comedic value. After Mario vs. Door concludes, we move on to the actual boss, this abomination. Wart is, well, not even that bad of a boss. He belches out these little gas bubbles and requires you to throw a vegetable at his mouth when it's open. It's pretty basic pattern recognition, and I'm not a huge fan of this final boss. It's still better than Bowser from the first game though. Once Wart is dead, you uncork this jar, let out a bunch of fairy creatures, and that's it. We get a celebration of communism, followed by a credit scene which features the name of all the enemies we've fought on our adventure, and wouldn't you know it, like half of them are f***ed up. Our adventure officially ends with this nightmare of an animation. And that's Super Mario Bros. 2. So how does this stack up to the original Super Mario Bros? Well, it's important to judge Mario 2's new features before we start making instant comparisons, so we'll talk about Mario 2's defining characteristic, the character selection. All 4 characters in this game, well, 3 of them at least, feel worthy of playing. None of the characters feel broken, and this game is entirely beatable by all 4 characters. Sure, there are some levels where certain characters will end up being more useful, but at the end of the day, this is a surprisingly balanced character roster. Princess would seem like the obvious broken character, as her floating makes many horizontal platforming sections a bit of a joke. There's not that many horizontal platforming sections in Mario 2 though, so this ability isn't quite as useful as you'd think it would be. And Princess's weakness kicks in pretty frequently with her low speed and, more importantly, her slow grabbing speed. This makes combat and boss fights tougher for the Princess than for other characters. On the other hand, Toad feels like he'd be useless. Toad has the shortest and lowest jump, but makes up for that by being the fastest runner, the fastest item grabber, and running around like a maniac when carrying something. In a normal Mario 2D platformer, Toad would be frustrating to play. Luckily, this is Mario 2 we're talking about, and Toad ends up being useful for the same reasons that nerfed the Princess. Toad is great at fighting bosses and enemies, and due to his short jump, he actually isn't bad for precision platforming either. Luigi is the character with the highest jump, and his jumping does not come at the cost of slow grabbing or running speed like it does with the Princess. This makes Luigi the character with the highest skill cap. If you want to break the game, doing it with Luigi is a good idea. Of course, Luigi still isn't overpowered, as he has a crucial downside: slippery handling. Every platform feels like it's made of ice, and for Luigi, this adds both a challenge and balancing. Whereas Princess uses her jumping to break platforming levels, Luigi can't really do that. Any platforming sections Luigi can't cross with one jump become nerve-wracking. Instead, Luigi uses his jumping prowess to break some levels and give Luigi options that no one else has. This leaves Mario in an unfortunate situation. Picking your character in Super Mario Bros. 2 is often a game of weighing out positives and picking out the character that is best for the level. You'll want to pick the Princess for levels with a focus on platforming, Toad for levels with sand digging or a combat focus, and Luigi for any levels that allow you to break the level as Luigi. Mario is the most balanced character out of the 4, and he controls fine. He doesn't have any of the downsides that the rest of the characters have either. He doesn't have slippery handling, he doesn't grab slowly, and he has a better jump than Toad. It is totally attainable and acceptable to beat the entire game as Mario. However, every time you play as Mario, you're forced to sit there and think, oh man, if only I was playing as Luigi. You never select Mario for his strengths in the level. You really only select Mario because you want to play as Mario and you want to play it safe. That's kind of unfortunate. The variety in characters is certainly the most put this on the box worthy addition to Mario 2, but I'd argue my favorite thing about Mario 2 compared to Mario 1 is the variety in levels and set pieces. Not all the worlds are themed as well as others, but in some form, every world has its own aesthetic and feel. Each world introduces new concepts, even the last 2 worlds, and each world, other than World 3 and 6, has a unique boss. In fact, if one counts Birdo and the Door, Super Mario Bros. 2 has 7 unique boss fights. Mario 1 has, well, 1. Another place Super Mario Bros. 2 improves on the original is the way the game looks and sounds. Compared to Mario 1, Mario 2 has way more detail in the background. It has varied set pieces and visualizes these set pieces in mostly effective ways. I didn't realize this was a warehouse for the longest time though. The sprites for the 4 characters all look good, although a few of them look a bit outdated. Where this game truly shines though is the excellent soundtrack. Mario 2 has one of my favorite soundtracks on the NES, with bopping tune after bopping tune. The title screen gets its own song this time, and it's a remix of Mario 1's Underwater theme. This is pretty cool. The character select screen is on a different level though. This song is very energetic and always makes me excited to try the next level. The Overworld theme in Mario 1 is more iconic than the Whopper, but I actually prefer Mario 2's Overworld theme. The melody's progression is so sick, and this song oozes Mario 2. I like the cave theme a lot too. It enforces the Middle Eastern theming this game still possesses, and it feels a bit creepy. The boss theme feels reminiscent of Mario 1's castle theme, but this is so much better. It's just as repetitive, but it only comes on once you get to the room with the boss, so it makes everything feel more real. Ward actually gets his own theme, unlike Bowser, and Ward's theme is my personal favorite in the game. It has a dire feel to it, and feels like a proper 8-bit final boss theme. I love it, and the ending theme is pretty good too. A couple songs from Super Mario Bros. Are remixed in Mario 2 as well. Besides the title screen, the Subspace theme is also a remixed version of Mario 1's Overworld theme. It's all chopped up, but you never hear more than 6 seconds of it, so whatever. The Starman theme returns, with some percussion added in for fun. Mario 2's soundtrack is good stuff, and it's exactly what I wanted from Mario 1's soundtrack. This has some variety, way more than Mario 1, but still has great tracks and keeps things simple. Everything is not rainbows and unicorns the entire way though. There are a couple of technical problems that Mario 2 has that were not problems in the original. A lot of these problems have to do with enemy spawning and the screen scrolling. I'll explain. Whenever you go past an enemy spawn point, if you return to that area, an enemy will respawn immediately. Now I understand exactly why they did this. Some enemies are required for progression and other enemies are not required, but they are helpful. This makes Mario 2 different than Mario 1, which had no respawning enemies. The problem is that the respawning is instant and feels overwhelming sometimes. The Kirby series, which has a similar need for this, does a much better job of allowing enemy respawns while still giving the player room to breathe. Another problem with the enemies is that they will start moving immediately when you enter the room. Luckily, I never had any problems with this during the Phanto chases, which would seem like the most obvious time to have a problem. Unluckily, this problem seemed to come up the most when leaving Subspace, and Subspace is a mechanic that is used in every single level. It doesn't happen too often, but it happens enough that I felt the need to mention it in this review. When there's too many enemies on the screen, Mario 2 likes to lag it up sometimes. This isn't a problem for most of the game, but it does flare up from time to time, and it is a bigger performance issue than anything Mario 1 had. Mario 2's vertical screen scrolling also causes a couple of issues. The horizontal scroll is fluid, and unlike Mario 1, it allows backtracking. The vertical scrolling is, well, not as fluid. This is not ideal when climbing, but it's terrible when falling. This is half of the contributor to the frustration of this section in level 5 too. It's jarring, it ruins momentum, and it causes other issues, like making it more difficult to float as Peach, or making it nearly impossible to catch vines after falling. I have a few other nitpicks with the controls as well, although these are minor in comparison to the previous couple of problems I've had. As fun as the throwing mechanic is, I do have my fair share of problems with throwing things accurately, despite practice. Maybe it's because I didn't grow up with the game, or maybe the arc is just that tough to work with, or maybe I'm just bad at video games. I don't know. Either way, it is something I notice every now and then. There are a couple of other oddities that also take away from the throwing mechanic. Firstly, if you throw something at the last second to cancel out another projectile, often the two thrown items will cancel each other out and hit the player. This happens often in the Birdo fights, and it feels wonky. I would much rather have the two projectiles become harmless after colliding, and maybe make something slightly more difficult to balance this. The mushroom blocks also have some weird behaviors. When you throw them at a standstill, they just drop straight down. I know that's to allow you to drop them on Fry Guys, for example, but it acts differently than every other projectile, and in boss fights involving them, I'm usually preoccupied with consciously thinking about the controls, and that's not ideal. My final nitpick with the throwing is what happens when you attempt to throw an enemy in the sand digging sections. As if I didn't have enough problems with the sand digging sections. Don't let these nitpicks make you think I have an overall negative perception on the way Mario 2 characters control. In fact, the rest of the game controls fairly well, and I'd say I'm overall satisfied with the way Mario and crew feel. It's just that every now and then, I feel the throwing mechanic causes me more trouble than it's worth. Let's focus on the positives now. Every character feels floaty, and I don't mean Luigi feels floaty when he jumps super high and falls slowly, or Princess feels floaty when she floats. Each character has a good amount of height to their jump, and you don't fall at melee Falco Lombardi speeds in Mario 2 like you did in the original. This works well in conjunction with the vertical levels, especially in tight areas involving tough enemies like Sparks and Panzers. These are difficult sections compared to the rest of the game, and yet I never feel like it's my fault when I take damage in these areas. The jumps respond well and control well, and are an overall highlight of the game to me. Of course, not everything controls this well. Sometimes when playing as Princess, I feel as though my character lets me down in boss fights, especially Birdo fights. Sometimes when playing as Luigi, tight platforming sections like the waterfall levels give me anxiety. And sometimes when playing as Toad, I discover Toad's meager jump lets me down from time to time. This is not a negative of the controls though. In fact, I think it's quite the positive. Since the player has full choice over which character they choose, these downfalls don't feel cruel, but rather, they feel like a consequence. If you want to be able to easy mode any horizontal sections as Princess, you have to live with the consequences of struggling against Birdo more, and maybe not getting as many coins in the subspace areas. This duality of positive controls and negative controls makes me feel alive. Before I start summarizing my opinions on Super Mario Bros. 2, I feel like it is necessary for me to go over my brief history with this game. Anytime I review a game where my personal history may interfere with my overall thoughts on the game, I feel as though it is relevant to bring this up. I didn't talk about it much on last week's review because, frankly, it didn't matter when it came to the original Super Mario Bros. As far as why I'm broaching the topic so late, it's because I want my critical review of Super Mario Bros. 2 to be detachable. Everything I've brought up before this section has been my mostly subjective but still logical retrospective of Super Mario Bros. 2. And for those who just want that, it's there. Now, as far as my personal history, I grew up in the mid-2000s. I didn't have an NES and I didn't have a Super Nintendo. I did, however, have a Game Boy Advance, and I experienced a good percentage of Mario's classics through the Super Mario Advance series. I had 3 of the 4 Super Mario Advance games as a kid, and the only one I didn't have was, of course, Super Mario Advance, which was the game based off of Super Mario Bros. 2. Due to the prevalence of Super Mario Bros. 1 in pop culture, I was able to experience that game as a kid despite never owning the game until around 2012 or so. This meant, out of Mario's classic 2D platformers, Super Mario Bros. 2 was always the one that got away. Of course, I was exposed to the game in some ways. Some Mario games featured homages to Mario 2, such as the Pidgeots in Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, or the continuous love Birdo gets in spin-off games. Super Smash Bros. Is a source of continuing Mario 2 love, with much of Princess Peach's moveset being based on her appearance here. Melee and Ultimate feature a Mario 2 themed stage with the main theme as the background music, and the stage features Birdos and Pidgeots. It's lovely stuff, except for actually playing on it. My subscription to Nintendo Switch Online granted me free legal access to the game for the first time in my life in 2018, and on the first playthrough, I was honestly underwhelmed. In fact, I quit halfway through World 3 to go play a different Mario game. After playing through the game 3 more times for this review though, my opinion on the game has changed quite a bit. I have a new appreciation for what Super Mario Bros. 2 does differently from the rest of the series. These platforming sections feel distinctly different from the other 2D classics. The vertical sections remind me of Kirby at times, and that's a good thing. Messing around with bombs and caves is just pleasurable. The bosses are arguably the strongest of the Mario classics. The enemies can really give you hell, especially Corbats, Ninjas, Panzers, and Sniffets. Finding the mushrooms in subspace is fun, and the character selection makes this game feel truly unique among the rest of the Mario series. If you're like me and you never had an NES or an NES cartridge of Super Mario Bros. 2, there are plenty of ways to experience this game still. Just like Mario 1, Super Mario Bros. 2 was one of the 4 games included on the Super Mario All-Stars compilation for the Super Nintendo. This, of course, meant Super Mario Bros. 2 got the SNES Boost, complete with 16-bit graphics and an upgraded soundtrack. It makes a few tweaks as well, including adding 7s to the roulette and allowing a player to switch characters after losing a life. Once the Game Boy Advance made its debut in 2001, Super Mario Bros. 2 re-entered the spotlight in the form of the remaster, Super Mario Advance. This game launched with the GBA and is heavily based on the All-Stars version, but with a lot of its own charm. In my opinion, this is the game that is the most different in the Super Mario Advance series. On the one hand, this is cool. So are the collectible coins, and so is the replay value that the Yoshi challenge adds. What isn't cool is this. Perhaps Perhaps the most interesting re-release of Super Mario Bros. 2 is BS Super Mario USA Power Challenge, an episodic game played on the Japan-only Teleview system. This game was played over the course of 4 weeks, where one volume would be available to play a week at a certain hour. It was the closest video gaming will ever get to radio, and it was f***ing weird. This port had numerous changes, including only being able to play as Mario. Oh, that's kinda lame. Besides all of these re-releases, Super Mario Bros. 2 has also been ported to numerous future Nintendo consoles. The Nintendo Wii got the original Super Mario Bros. 2 in 2007, and the Wii U got Super Mario Advance in 2014. The NES Classic comes bundled with the game, and Nintendo Switch Online users have access to it as well. Unfortunately, one release that never did make it to the United States was the original Doki Doki Panic. It is highly unlikely we will ever see the original version of this game, and if we ever did, I honestly think Mario 2 would lose some of its mystique. The story of how a Fuji Technology Expo became the sequel to one of the best-selling video games of all time is a fascinating one, and I suspect a lot of that is due to the murky path from point A to point B. No matter how interesting you think the story is though, Super Mario Bros. 2's legacy is largely based on whether or not it was a worthy successor to the original Super Mario Bros. Is Mario 2 bigger and better than Mario 1? I think you'd have to say yes. Is Mario 2 an evolution of Mario 1? No, it is not. Ultimately, this is the biggest gripe you could have with Super Mario Bros. 2. It feels like a completely different game than the original, and thus, it feels like a weird sequel. However, I do agree with Nintendo of America's ultimate decision to release this as Super Mario Bros. 2 rather than the Japanese version. I think Mario 1 and Mario 2 are similar in quality, and as such, Super Mario Bros. 2 joins very solid company in the Glut.